Donald Trump has vetoed bipartisan resolutions prohibiting arms sales to both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Now, this is actually one of the few instances where both Democrats and Republicans agree on something. And they are in agreement that Saudi Arabia should not have access to US-made weapons. Now, this has been a big issue following the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And it appears that Donald Trump does not care in the least about doing the right thing or listening to members of his own party. So the bipartisan bills would have blocked licensing for certain arms sales in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the UK, France, Spain, and Italy. And look, to be honest with you, if we could just ban weapons sales to other countries overall, that would be great. Because that has done nothing but cause more war, more damage, that the weapons end up in the wrong hands. Now remember, Donald Trump loves to fearmonger about Representative Ilhan Omar, and he claimed that she's some sort of Al-Qaeda sympathizer. You wanna know who works with Al-Qaeda? Saudi Arabia, and our weapons end up in the hands of Al-Qaeda. So I'll give you a specific example. Earlier this year, back in February, CNN had conducted an investigation to find out where US-made weapons end up. Saudi Arabia and its coalition partner in Yemen, the United Arab Emirates, transferred US-made weapons to Al-Qaeda-linked groups and a Salafi militia whose commander once served in the Yemeni branch of ISIS. So that's where our weapons are ending up. Also, the CNN investigation said that the weapons had also made their way into the hands of Houthi rebels who are battling against the coalition for control of the country. So it's a mess. And Saudi Arabia has been working with Al-Qaeda. Saudi Arabia is not our friend, but Donald Trump likes to make a lot of money. Now, before we get to a flashback video of Donald Trump saying the quiet parts out loud when it comes to Saudi Arabia, I want to go to a State Department spokeswoman and what her response to this veto was.
This caused some members of Congress to say that the administration is not treating them as a co-equal branch. Is the secretary concerned about that perception?
Well, the Congress voted. They sent legislation to the president. He vetoed it. Ain't democracy grand. Next.
So super dismissive, and the executive branch wants to solidify its power, and they want to minimize any type of power that Congress has. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in checks and balances. The Trump administration wants to make decisions unilaterally, and he's proven that time and time again.
It's one of those instances when I remember whenever a president, sure, most every president's had vetoes, not most every president's had vetoes, but usually when they do it, it's one of those things where they don't want to boast and brag about it and say, hey, guess what we just did? You usually go, man, we have to veto this. There's a little bit of even if they don't care, there's a somber approach to it. So the society thinks, man, they really don't want to do this on their own, but they have to because it's just that important. They put together this well thought out approach and statement to say why they had to do it despite the thoughtful things that Congress put forward. Instead, it's just, ain't democracy grand? Because it works for us this time, but ain't democracy grand when in 2018 Congress was flipped when they said no, it doesn't matter. Ain't democracy grand whenever the majority of the country voted against you? Democracy ain't grand in those situations. Democracy is only grand when it benefits you. That ain't democracy if that's the only time that it's grand.
Absolutely.
But they don't care.
No. And this unilateral move to go ahead and say, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and cross all boundaries and ignore everything just so that I can make this money, and also kind of almost start this whole fueling a world war thing, which is not awesome, but very much seems to be going on. It just really speaks to the fact that this man really wants to watch the world burn, as long as it'll put a buck in his pocket.
Exactly. We're gonna get to that in just a second, but I want to show you one other video from this State Department spokeswoman from Central Casting.
Done to ensure that those weapons won't be used on civilians in Yemen?
We would have to get into a specific discussion about the type of weapon. I mean, we'd have to get into a weapons discussion that probably goes beyond the State Department podium. We can get a much more lengthy and detailed discussion, but I don't think we can, we would have to go through every weapon that's in the thing in order to accurately answer that.
So she knows nothing and is also incredibly dismissive of the fact that we should have a democratic system of checks and balances, a constitutional system of checks and balances. But with that said, I want to remind you of why Donald Trump thinks it's important to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. And again, keep in mind that a Washington Post journalist was murdered as an order by the Saudi, prince, Crown Prince, exactly. So this is a video from October of 2018. Donald Trump is talking about why he wants to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia.
I don't like stopping massive amounts of money that's being poured into our country. I know they're talking about different kinds of sanctions, but they're spending $110 billion on military equipment and on things that create jobs, like jobs and others for this country. I don't like the concept of stopping an investment of $110 billion into the United States. Because you know what they're going to do? They're going to take that money and spend it in Russia or China or someplace else. Up front, right now, and I'll say it in front of senators, they're spending $110 billion purchasing military equipment and other things. As to whether or not we should stop $110 billion from being spent in this country, knowing they have 4 or 5 alternatives, 2 very good alternatives, that would not be acceptable to me.
He always says the quiet parts out loud.
He couldn't stop saying $110 billion, $110 billion, because that's all he can think of. And maybe they'll go to someone else. We'll get to where this goes as well. We know where this is going in reality, but so at the beginning, during that whole press, when Jamal Khashoggi was murdered, and they went through the whole thing, and he kept saying, well, first, he went through, it was a roller coaster of emotions. First it was, well, I don't really believe it happened. Remember that part? It didn't really happen that way. Ben Salman told me it didn't happen that way, so I believe him.
He has this, I don't know, liking to terrible people. Like he will believe and take at face value what any terrible person in the world has to say.
Yeah, and runs with it. And then after that, it was also during that same moment, I think he said, I don't believe Jamal Khashoggi was, he wasn't a citizen even, was he? Because I need to find a way to make sure this man's life means nothing. He just wrote for the Washington Post, who cares? He got murdered, dismembered. So it's okay, it doesn't really matter, because you know how I feel about journalists anyway. And then he eventually had to accept it because it was overwhelming evidence, which is actually a little rare because there's plenty of overwhelming evidence that they don't really care about anyway. And then had to go on and say, but it's $110 billion, come on. Yep. That's the policy.
Yeah, and to Donald Trump, everything has a price. It is a commodity, including morality, ethics. Oh, what is the price? And the thing is, to be president, you should have some kind of moral compass. And unfortunately, Donald Trump doesn't have that at all. And world peace, things like our safety, our alliances, those are not up for sale. But for him, if anything, they are something to be sold as long as he can get that money and figure out a way to put it in his pocket or the pocket of those who align with him.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.